Welcome back to part 2 in the series on performing live using Logic Pro 10. Now, in the first one we did a lot of background and dipped our toes into the environment a little bit, but ultimately stayed fairly basic. This time around, we're going to really dive in and become power users with some cool features within Logic that are going to help us as we perform live. So I'm going to start by going over the 3 tracks that I skipped last time and what I used them for. Now, you don't have to create these, but you can do something similar if the need is there for you. So the first one that I've got is the lights track. In order for any of these to be good, you actually have to create a region, which you can do by hitting Escape, the number 2 for pencil tool, and then click to create a region. And once you've created the region and you highlight it, you can then come over here to the event list and you can actually create different events. So here's your menu. You can create notes, program change, pitch bend, all of this stuff. Okay, so for lights, my particular light controller translates MIDI notes into DMX data. So as I click on this, you see here I've got built 3 example notes at certain bars that are going to go out to trigger the lights. And so I keep this track empty except for lighting changes so that I can quickly and easily see where I'm at. The next one is the control track. I use this for any program changes and Logic meta events. Now this is important to understand. Logic has an internal set of commands that are very similar to how MIDI works, except that meta events are internal to Logic. They don't go anywhere else and no other device would know what to do with a meta event. It's only for internal control of Logic. However, you can translate any meta event or fader event into a MIDI command, so you can make them useful. So in this instance, you can see that I've shown the global tracks and I've created a few markers for you. So I'm calling this intro, verse, chorus, and then this is the notional end of the song, and this is the marker for the next song. And I've got a 2-bar break between those two. And I'll show you how I use this control track. So let's say we're here in the chorus to the song. I hit play. And as it goes, during the live performance, I don't want to have to come over and stop it. So the way that I get around that is by clicking on this and creating meta event number 52. So again, we've got this menu that we can select from. Click meta event and then create, and it'll create at whatever position the playhead is at. And then you've got a menu that you can select what meta event you want it to be with a little key here that tells you what each one is. Tabs, guitar grids, chord symbols, etc. So what I want specifically in this instance is the stop playback, meta event number 52. And you can see I've already built one there. So I will delete this one, but you saw what happened. So at the end of the song, when we get done with playback, I don't have to touch anything. It hits that meta event and stops playback automatically. Now all I have to do is just go to the next bar, hit play, and we're into the next song and everything's starting. Finally, I have this chords and music track. Now, what I use this for is to display any sheet music notation or lyrics, or even chord grids for display while we're performing. We do a lot of different songs, and sometimes we don't rehearse all of them before the show, and so it's nice to just have a visual reference for the structure of the song so that even when we come back to it a while later, we kind of know where we're at and we can keep track of it. So I've created a basic C major chord just so you can see in the piano rolls. When I come over to the score editor and click this, you'll see you can actually attach lyrics. I've got my beautiful lyrics, I have the notation, and I have a chord grid for all the guitarists out there with the letter name. And you can go along and do block chords all along the way. And remember, this is not actually outputting anywhere. No output. This is only for display, so we'll use this during live performance. So let's say you're not into sheet music. You're a by-ear musician and you don't really want or need sheet music. Well, there's another way to do it. Come up here to the marker, and you'll notice I've entered both a chord, C major, with lyrics blah blah, and then verse, super cool verse, and chorus, amazing memorable chorus. Keep that in mind for later, and I'm going to show you how we'll use this to display a couple of different ways for our perform mode within Logic. Alright, so let's hit screen set 3 by pressing the 3 key and head back over to the environment. So first off, I've created these faders. So what you would do to get these same faders is come up here to New, Fader, Vertical 3. But you can pick any of these, you can look through all of them. And you can pick, even after the fact, you can select different styles to see what they all look like. I like Vertical 3 because you can resize them. Also, one little trick, let's say you create them and they look something like this where they're sort of, all over the place and out of alignment. When you highlight them together, come up to Options, Clean Up, and Align Objects, and it will snap them back together to a grid. Now, these are going to be my on-screen controls that I'm going to use very similar to MainStage's perform mode on-screen controls. But these require a little bit more effort to map, but they fulfill the same function. So first, let's take a look at these fader objects and what they're actually doing. If we look in the inspector, we've got the style, which we've already selected. Then we have an output section and an input section with a range for the number, and then a value and a filter. The output section is what this fader is going to send out. What kind of message, when we move this fader, is it going to send? The input section is what message does it respond to in order to move. First, my particular keyboard controller is the Axiom Pro, and so it's actually this same output that we created in part 1 of the tutorial. So I'm going to take a second wire and route it up here to the guitar input selector. Now, when I move this, you'll notice down here in the monitor, you can see channel 1, CC74, and 0 to 127 is what moves it. Now I've preset this up, so when I click on here, I've already set it up to, on the input section, it is receiving control change messages on channel 1, and it's specifically CC74 from range 0 to 127. And as you can tell, with it cabled up, it is responding perfectly to my hardware fader as I move it. Now, I want to route this to the guitar channel strip, which is here. I'll move it over. But what I want to happen is I want for this to actually move the fader. Okay, so we have to do a little bit of sleuthing to find out, because remember, Logic has its own internal set of controls, which we talked about earlier, meta events and fader events. If I were to wire this up right now and move it, you'll notice that the fader over here is moving, but nothing is happening to the guitar's fader. Now, why is that? If you look at the output section, you'll see that we're outputting control change 7 on channel 1. So let's move this though, and I've got this attached, and let's stop here and let me tell you, monitors are your friend, monitor objects. So when you come up here to new monitor, you'll notice I've got several of them created all over the screen here, and I use them all the time. These are very handy to figure out where problem areas are. So if you'll notice here, I've got these channel strips, their output routed to this monitor object so that I can see actually what they're outputting. So when I move the guitar's fader, what is it doing? You see up here there's a little F with the channel 1. So it's outputting fader data on channel 1, and it's fader 7 from 0 to 127. Now let's go back over here to guitar and look in our output section. It's outputting control. So click on that menu and let's change it to fader 7. Now, when I move the hardware fader, you'll notice it is also moving the guitar channel strip. So good, they're hooked up and they're working. But now there's an additional problem in that when I move my fader to the top, you'll notice it's going to plus 6 dB on the guitar channel strip. I never want to go that high. There's a problem if I'm going that high. I always want to keep everything at unity gain and adjust the volumes accordingly and cut from there. I never want to clip anything. So I don't want the maximum value of the fader to go to plus 6. So how do we fix that? Well, you'll notice over here there's a range. And so what you do, this took some experimentation, so I know the number, but what you do is you would set the range, instead of 127, we would go to 90. So 0 to 90 is actually the top of the fader here. Now you notice it's still moving above. So when I move this value on my hardware controller, you'll notice that the point at which the visual fader over here reaches the top is actually at 0 dB, but this fader continues on up still to 6, even though I've set the range there. So, well, there's a nice little object that we can use called a transformer. So you click New and Transformer. Now I've already created one here, and I've called it Fader Transformer. So when we first double click on Fader Transformer, it's going to open up the actual transform window that lets us control exactly what's going to happen. So we're going to apply this operation to the selected events and let non-matching events pass through. But you can pick any one of these options. Read up on them and see which one works for you. So initially, when you first open it up, you're going to see something like this. It's going to be all, and through, all the way down, like so. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit status equals, and we want to adjust control messages. We don't want to adjust anything else in this particular transformer. You can set a specific channel, but in this instance, it doesn't really matter. I want all channels Data byte 1 is the particular control change message that we are going to affect. You could pick a specific one. You could say equals and then say, hey, CC74, I want this to happen. But let's stick with all for now. And then data byte 2. This is the most important one. So we're going to say data byte 2 inside 0 to 127. So this is the complete range of the value that's being sent from this CC number. So again, to reiterate, this is control change on all channels, all CCs, with specific values inside 0 to 127. Now, we don't want those to go through. Remember, that was the problem. We don't want that to go above. We actually want to scale those. So come here, and instead of through, we're going to hit scale. Now, this also took a little bit of trial and error in math, so I went ahead and figured it out for you. And so we've got to figure out a scale. We've got to translate that value of 90 over here, the range. We've got to turn 90 into a percentage of 127. So I went ahead and figured it out for you. It's 0.71. You'll notice what it did there. It scaled it down. So now what we're saying is that all the numbers that are going to be coming through are 0 to 127, but we only want you to output up to 0.71 of that range. In other words, 0 dB. Okay, so now I'm going to save it. We're going to take this routing, and instead of going straight to the fader, we're going to go through the transformer. And then we're going to output the transformer into this fader. And now watch what happens. It only goes to 0 dB, just like we want. So now I can push it all the way up, and you'll notice here in this monitor, it's going all the way to 127, but the transformer has scaled it down so that only ever outputs a maximum of 0 dB. And you can do that with all of them. So watch as I adjust. Let's say you want to control pan, for instance. Fader 10 on channel 1. So you can see the values coming across there as I move that. And so you can figure out any of these with a monitor object attached to your channel strip objects. You can figure out all of the different values that you want to control. So then this is fader 30 on channel 1. Okay, so I'm skipping ahead a little bit because now that you understand the concept, you can build as many faders and knobs and buttons as you like, and you now know how to route them and figure out how to control whatever parameter you want. So I've created some additional knobs here with some buttons so that you can see that you can model your physical hardware much like you can with MainStage's on-screen controls. Okay, so the next thing that I want to add now is project navigation when we're performing live. So remember, this top corner here is going to eventually be part of our on-screen controls. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to add is in faders again, but now we're going to go down to the specials category. And I'm going to add a go-to marker fader. Now initially it's going to pop up like this, but we're going to change the style. Instead of auto style, I'm going to go ahead and select as text. As text. Now you can resize it so that you can see it like that. This is an amazing little device, and usually what I'll do is I'll place it right down here, and I'll show you why later. You can double click on it and then click this Behave as Menu button. And you can call this something like Song Navigator. You can actually enter all of the names of the markers in this field. So we've got intro, verse, chorus, and then remember we had next song with that little gap. So now we have a song navigator that's going to behave like a menu. So what that means is when I come over here to this object and I click and hold, we've now got a menu to navigate to any portion of any song that we want for as many markers as you have. So it lists 20, but you can do way more than 20 if you'd like. Okay, so final bit of housekeeping here to make this really look like some nicer on-screen controls is you can click and highlight and then hit Option C to bring up the color selection palette. So we're going to colorize these by channels just to make them a little visually easier to see. So as I've said earlier, this corner of the window is actually going to be some of our on-screen controls. So why don't we get a screen set that begins to look a little more like MainStage's Perform window. So let's go to screen set 4. So this is purely technique, but I would take a good look at all of the available options in here and see what you need to see. So the first thing that I will do, then this is technique 1 of what I was showing you earlier, is I'll open a score editor. So I'll run the score editor across the top, and I don't actually want to edit the score. So up here in score sets, I'm going to go down to the chords and music track, and you can see that's that C major chord that I made earlier. Okay, now I can hit the I key to get rid of the inspector, and we have this nice, neat sheet music display along the top of the screen that will play music along with our project as we go. So we've got lyrics displayed, chords with a chord chart in time. Next up, what I will typically do is open up our MIDI environment window on this screen. So we're going to get rid of cables, we're going to not display them anymore, and we're also going to make it a frameless floating window, like so. Now what we can do is drag this into a nice little control that you can put over here in the corner. And as you can see, while we're playing and navigating, I can control all of my levels and see where I'm at. And conveniently, we can also get to various points in the song that we need to get to via the menu. From here, one of the next things I like to display is I will open a transport float. But I'm not actually going to use a full transport. What I'm going to do is click on the toolbar here and open a giant beats display and open a giant time display, and then I'll get rid of that transport. And I'll set these right here, and I'd like to arrange all of these windows as if they are kind of a heads-up display, very similar to MainStage's Perform view. So the reason why I do both of those is so I can see, generally speaking, where we're at on the timeline. This is kind of a rough estimate of how long we've been playing, not including the breaks, of course. But it gives me a general wag at how long we've been playing. And then this is actually a visual metronome. So in the event that something went wrong with the click track, I can still physically look at the numbers going by there and use that to get a sense of timing. So for example, at 1 gig, my in-ear monitors, my wireless monitors, the battery died during the middle of a song. And I couldn't stop to replace the battery, so I had to keep going, and I ended up using this as my metronome. So I looked at that while I was playing, and I was able to make my way through the song still. So that's important. Now, if you're a keyboard or guitar player, one option that you can use here is bringing up some smart controls. Now, you'll have to link this to a particular track that you want to utilize. Okay, so here, as you can see, I have now linked the smart controls to a guitar pedal board. These were just the default assigned controls. You can make them, of course, whatever you want, just like with all of the rest of the smart controls. And as you can tell on the screen now, this is really starting to look very similar to a MainStage display. Not quite as neat as the black display, but very, very close. And you can make your desktop a black background if you like. So you can get it very usable. And so the one other thing I wanted to cover, let's say you don't want sheet music, right? You're a person who just wants to see lyrics and maybe chords. Well, I don't know why it's not under the Window tab, but if you come over here to Navigate and click on Open Marker Text, you'll see this window pop up, which you can now drag across the top. And I'm going to hit Enter, and it takes us back to the beginning. Now, it's important that you have this Catch Playhead button checked. But watch what happens when I hit play. Notice it's playing here. And as we get to the next section of the song, you're going to see it automatically change to verse. Super cool verse, and the lyrics change. And then next up is the chorus with amazing, memorable chorus. So if you just want a really simplified display, this is the way to do it. And you can write in whatever you need to do in the text, edit it, and change the color. Now, you'll notice just now that, again, it stopped automatically. Remember earlier, we built that meta event that stopped playback at that particular point, so we don't even have to think about it. And we can come over here and confirm that it did in fact stop right there. And now, in screen set 4 here in our Perform window, we can actually just hit Next Song. And there we go. Now we're at the beginning of the next song, and hit play and keep right on rolling. So now we have a fully robust live performance rig using just Logic that's fully automated with lyrics, with changes, with automated effects, and the whole shebang. Now the one kind of weakness to this method is that it does limit the amount of improvisation that you can do in a live show versus MainStage, which has things like loop back and playback plugins where you can just do things from scratch, record them, loop them, and go live. However, we can still be creative within Logic and incorporate some improvisational-like elements into our song. So for example, let's say that the chorus at the end, the crowd's really getting into it, and I want to have that chorus loop on the fly real time. When it's playing here, there's a key command that you can assign, and it's set locators by marker and enable cycle. So watch this. The playhead is still going through, but I can navigate in real time between the different markers with cycle enabled. So let's say we want to just jam on the chorus for a bit. Well, now it's going to hit that and just loop real time on the chorus until we're ready to move on. And so let's say we get through it and it feels right and we're good. Now I can just disable cycle. And of course, it's now going to play through just like it normally does, where it will get to the end and playback stops based on our meta event. So you can use this in all kinds of ways. We can loop sections of the songs, or you can actually build within your project a improvisation section, for example, where you've got an ultra beat track with loops enabled and whatever you can think of. So there's several ways to do that. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. I hope you can see that you can actually use Logic in a very powerful way for live performance. That's not to say that main stage isn't good, but for those of you who want to automate things, this is a wonderful tool to do that. Again, if you enjoyed it, go ahead and click the subscribe button and definitely check out my Patreon page. Thanks for watching.